Hi everyone, this is Lisa from Imposter Baker, and today I'm going to show you how to shade some fake biscuits. So here we have some that are just clay. You can make these out of regular clay, you can make them out of air dry clay, air foam clay, plaster of Paris. You can make these by hand with clay. You can use a mold, like a silicone mold for biscuits. And so there's lots of different ways you can do it. And I believe that Cassie Smallwood has a video on that, or someone else perhaps has a video on how to do that. If you'd like me to share how I did that, I'll be happy to do that in another video. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to shade. So basically, when you're doing your shading and you want things to look realistic, you're going to use multiple layers. Now, the clay that I used, I mixed clays to give it this kind of dough color. I wanted to start out with a color that looked that way. So what I did was I mixed white and a little bit of yellow, bright yellow, or probably primary yellow, you would call it, clay into it until I got the right color that I liked. I don't have any measurements. It's just, I do it all by eye. You can add a tiny bit of light brown clay in there. You would use just a small amount of that, real small amount, but I don't believe I used that at all. I think I just used the white and the yellow. And you can, Bose has clay on Amazon. You can get clay lots of places on Etsy. And we'll talk about that in another video too. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I used, the startup color I used here, I actually just have some mixed up in this container I'm trying to use up. And what that is a mixture of white apple barrel paint and antique white. So it's more antique white, or maybe it's about half and half, because antique white is just a little too dark. So I cut it down about by half with the apple barrel white paint. Okay, so that was in this mix. So that's what I started with, and that's what you see here. I've dipped in a little bit. The other color you're going to want to mix in, because I started with this base that already basically looked like that. If you just use white, you would want to probably start with that mix and do that first and paint that. I like to try to do as less painting as possible because I don't really like painting and I'm very messy at it. So the other color you're going to use is Classic Caramel. So what you're going to do is you would mix some of your Classic Caramel and your antique white mix together. And to that, I take a tiny bit of water on my brush, and then I mix that all in together. So here we'll mix up a little bit so you can see what I did. So here is my Classic Caramel and the antique white, and let's just kind of mix it all in together here with that water. Just a little bit of water, just enough to kind of give you a little bit of, you want to just smooth it out a little bit. Now I feel like I want a little bit more of that white in there, because this first layer of shading, I want it to be subtle. I don't want it to be really obvious. So I'm going to just mix a whole lot of that in. And probably the wise way to mix this is not with your brush. You should not do that. Don't do what I did. Use a popsicle stick, toothpick, something like that to mix it up. That's really what you should be doing. That's a good way to ruin your brush. Luckily, this is a pretty inexpensive brush. I think it came from the dollar store. But I regress. Just don't do that. Don't do what I did. Next, you're going to want to make sure that, and this might be out of frame, so I'm just going to show you. You're always going to want to dab this off. So it looks like I did get it a lot lighter than my other one. So let's go ahead and add a little bit more caramel to that, because I really did get it a little too light. So, and it's all, there's no measurements. It's all by eye. You can't really mess it up if you, start lighter. It's easier to darken than it is to light. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better to me. I'm going to wipe this off, and then we'll get a little bit of this on our brush, and let's try again and see where we're at. That's better. It's a little bit lighter than the others, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. So I'm going to take the bottom of my biscuit first, and as you saw, you're going to tap off as much of that, you know, a lot of it. You don't want this to be too dark. And when you apply it, go different directions. Go back and forth. You're lightly touching the edges here, and don't go all one direction, because then you'll have brush marks, or it'll be obvious that you painted on it. So you don't want it to look obvious. I'm going to hit those edges a little bit, you know, the edges that would have touched the pan, let's say. And then we're going to go ahead and start pulling it up to the sides here. So there I got it a little heavy, I would say. Let's kind of wipe a little bit of that away, because I went in one spot too much, or because I was using my brush to mix with, I didn't get it out of my brush good. So we're going to go ahead and just keep turning it and go in different directions. And I got a little something in there. I'm not sure what that is. Yep, just a little piece of something. There we go. Something teal colored. And then just kind of go around, hit those top edges. Okay, so this doesn't have to be super dark. Now, some of these, you know, I got them a little bit darker, or the ridges got hit a little bit more. But all your biscuits aren't going to be exactly the same. If your oven's like mine, some biscuits get darker than others. Then we're going to go ahead and pull it to the top. Just see what we got left on that brush, because I'm guessing there's quite a bit in there still, because I was very bad and used it to mix my paint with. So we're just going to grab a little bit more paint, brush it off a little bit, and then as you're dragging it across back and forth, you see how it's getting just a little bit darker, right? And then where the parts are grooved in more, just like in your oven, that's not going to cook as much, right? It might hit a little bit or get a little bit, but down in, it's going to stay that original dough color. You know, you can go around and hit your bottom edges. Now, you can just go ahead and let this dry. That's what I'm going to do at this point. I'm going to hit this a little bit more along the top. But at this point, I'm going to let them dry. So these are the ones that are drying. These are the ones I did earlier. So this is, I mean, I probably did these about 20 minutes ago, and they're already pretty dry. Because you're dry brushing and it's not a lot of liquid, it doesn't take terribly long to dry. Now, the bottoms have been sitting on this mat, so those are obviously a little bit more tacky. I worry less about the bottom. You could do all your bottoms, flip them over, let them dry, and then do the rest of your things. With this type of mat, I don't worry about that too much. Now, if you set these on wax paper or parchment paper or anything like that, I have found that that doesn't work as well for me. I like to use this type of thing, or a silicone mat, which you see, this is a silicone mat underneath here. But I was working with some coffee grunge before. I wiped it down and I knew it would get all over, so I just got a different mat. And like, I'll just get a clean mat, although I've already got it dirty. So you could go back and start shading your next shade. So what I would do after that, let's do one more this way. We're going to kind of go through, and again, tap that brush off, and then you can use any kind of brush. One thing that I made a mistake of a lot when I first started out is that I would use a tiny brush. I would use this tiny brush doing all this, and it took forever. It took me forever, and I don't know why it didn't hit me that I needed to use a larger brush. And you could even go bigger, like I have, pardon me, you know, a brush this big. You could use a brush this big. I mean, it wouldn't matter. You'd have to make sure you tapped it out just the same, but you don't have to use, I don't know why, this size, or I don't know, I have a lot of these little brushes this size, so that's probably why it's been my go-to. Okay, so again, we're just going to hit those edges, because again, what cooks the most but hitch the bottom of your pan, right? So you want those edges done. And we're going to tap a little more on and tap a little more off. And so then you're just going to, so you're grazing those outer lumps and bumps, just like on a pie or any other baked good. Whatever is closest to the heat and flame gets the most browning. So that's why we're doing it this way. And we're just going to keep going around. I can see I'm starting to lose a little bit of my paint. You know, I'm starting to lose a little bit of it. So I'm going to just pull off a little bit more. And I'm not pulling a lot, y'all. You can't even see it on there. Oops, and see, that time I did not dab my brush, and that's what happens. But that's an easy fix. You could take your paper towel, just wipe it away. Make sure you dampen your brush off. But that's what happens if you don't wipe your brush off. If you don't wipe your brush, you're gonna get just a glob of paint. And you don't want that. You want it to look, if you're looking for it to look natural and realistic. So again, I was doing those edges first. Then I'm gonna take my brush different ways, back and forth, and just brown that up. So see how much better that looks already compared to, you know, here's one not shaded. Let's see if I'm in the camera here. So that's shaded and not shaded. And we've got more layers to go on this. This isn't our last layer. And we'll brown it up a little bit more. What I do for the next layer is I just use the classic caramel by itself, but I thin it down. So let's do one so you can see how that works. I am gonna switch brushes though, because well, no, I'm not gonna switch brushes because I don't have another one out here this size. Okay, so we're gonna take our classic caramel. I mean, I know it's mixed up, but I have it. I'm gonna mix it. And we're gonna put a dab in here. Just a little bit. We don't need a lot of this. And then I'm gonna pull, I don't know if you can see my little water thing off camera. I just use some whey jars. I like this yogurt, and so I keep the jars. I use them for this, and I use them to put my glue in. When it's starting to get empty, I flip it upside down in this to help it drain to the top. Okay, and I'm gonna dab some of that water out because I got a lot of it. And I'm gonna go ahead and just mix that. Okay, so I did not get enough at all. So let's get a little bit more paint in there. I don't know, something happened. You don't always judge it. I'm gonna get a little bit more paint because I do want this thinned out just a little bit more. Okay, and I don't mind if there's a little bit of other paint in there. It shades it down a little bit, but not much. And then I'm just gonna pull that out as much as I can because I want to use this same paint. So I don't want to just go push it all out into my paper towel. I want to keep as much of this paint as I can because I already got it all mixed up and it's looking nice. And so you see how much comes off the brush. So now I'm going to go ahead and just tap that brush off. Okay, and then we're going to take one that's already pretty dry. The bottom's not that dry, but we're going to go ahead. I always do my bottoms first, partly because it helps me kind of test out what does that color look like? How dark is it? And see, this isn't quite dry, so I'm gonna flip over the next one just so it starts to get some air to the bottom and we can work on it. See, you'll start to get this, like this pattern because the clay was still wet from it sitting on this. You'll see a difference on the top where it's already getting dried. So thankfully that's the bottom. I don't care too much, but let's go ahead. I flipped over a couple so we can get some air to them and let them dry. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and do that bottom edge. We're gonna try to do that bottom edge. I'm gonna grab a little bit more paint and tap it off and get that bottom edge a little bit. So I'm just doing that very edge here, right this line right here, that you would notice is cooked. You know, when you pull them off the pan or you're looking to see if they're done, that's kind of one of the indicators right? When you're baking. So we're going to pull it on up here, and we're just going to hit the very outer edges. We're hardly putting any of this on because we don't want a lot of that on. We want it to just hit the very most prominent points. Same up here. We're going to do it like this, and we're going to get that edge, right? We're just going to get that edge so it's a little bit darker. And then we're going to brush it across here. And I think like that's enough right there. I think that is enough. So let's look at one that's, so here's the difference. This one's got the second layer of shading. Okay, so we went from, you know, we've got this lap of dough to, wow, something's starting to come around and look a little more realistic. Okay, to that's looking pretty realistic to me. Like, I could want to take a bite of that. Okay, so that's what you do as far as the shading. You can make this darker, you can make it lighter. If you prefer your biscuits, you know, lighter like this, they don't look bad. I just feel like this looks a little bit more realistic. And then same with your edges. You know, I think it just makes it look a little bit more baked and realistic. And then that's the next step to this. Then you'd let that dry. And then your next step would be to do a sealer. Once they're fully dry, and by the way, you want your biscuits to be fully dry. These have been drying for about 2 weeks, probably a week and a half to 2 weeks. I form them, I put them on a baking rack. I use an actual baker's rack because of the quantity that I do. You do not have to do that. You can dry them on something like this, on parchment sheets or something like that, silicone mat. You just have to flip them. You got to flip them and let them dry. Looks like I got something else on this one. We'll get that off of there. We'll set that one aside and get that off of there. Yeah, you'll need to flip them. Make sure they're fully dry, because if these are still wet, they're going to be squishy. You know, these are not squishy. I mean, they're squishy because it's airfoam clay, but you can't destroy the shape of them unless you really tried to do that purposely. Okay, so I'm trying to, oh, the sealer, that's what we were doing. Okay, so for the sealer, I like to use this brand. Okay, you can use Mod Podge. There's nothing wrong with Mod Podge. It is a little bit stickier. And that's why I don't like it quite as much. Now, these are the different, let's see, okay, so it comes in an ultra matte, a matte, and a satin. I will tell you that these to me are a level up from what they say. So matte to me seems like a low satin. Satin seems like pretty satiny, like more like a gloss. Maybe not quite gloss, but nearly gloss. Ultra matte is pretty matte. It's got a little itty bitty bit of sheen to me, as far as my eye looks. So keep that in mind when you're buying this. I think so. To me, matte says a little satin. Really, I would have changed the names of these if it were me, but that's how this particular one, the Deco Art, works. So if you want a pretty matte, I don't think we want a shiny looking biscuit. I would do ultra matte on this. I'm going to kind of see how it looks when I do the full ultra matte, and I can't do that until this paint is fully dry, but I'm going to see how that looks. And then maybe I'll add a matte to the top because it has a little bitty bit of a sheen. Just keep that in mind if you're using that particular brand. I actually got a bunch of this. I mean, you saw that one is pretty expensive. That was at a dollar store. They had a going out of business sale, and I got these for like 80% off. Okay, so that's why I stacked up and have a bunch of them, and they look like they were expensive, but they were not. But if you go to Michael's, Hobby Lobby, all the places that you normally get these are expensive. They're not, it's not, you know, Mod Podge is more economical. So you could use Mod Podge. There's nothing wrong with that. Do it thin, I would advise. And what I like about the Deco Art is that it is thinner. It lasts longer. I mean, it comes in a smaller jug, like as opposed to how I buy my Mod Podge. You know, you can get this in all sizes too, but I would say this is going to last as long as this, you know, maybe longer. I don't know. I've never like timed that out, but this goes on very thin. You do very thin layers. It is runny. You can hear that it's runny. So keep that in mind. I usually apply that with a sponge, like a makeup sponge wedge. I use a lot of these little cups like this, and I'll just use one of these and then dab my sponge in and dab it on, because it is so runny. And with a brush, I don't know, it just becomes more messy. I've done it with a brush, I've done it with a sponge. I like the sponge better. So okay, so I think that pretty much does it for today. We can, well, let's do this for this other one here. We've got, this is pretty dry on here now. So let's go ahead and let's do this one more and see. Okay, so we're gonna get a little bit of that caramel mix on our brush. You can see that I get paint all over me. I am a messy painter. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just get this dabbed on here. And we're gonna use our brush different ways, right? We're not gonna put all one direction. We want it to look natural. And see, that went on a much better than the one that was already damp on the bottom. It's similar. It started to smear and I had to stop what I was doing with it because it just wasn't looking right. And you'll be able to tell as you practice and do these things. But again, I'm pulling up that edge. This really, the bottom edge here, because I want that to have some toastiness to it. I want it to look baked and delicious. And then we're gonna go ahead and pull it on up here. And then you can see I am getting a little bit of color as compared to what it was, okay? Not a lot, because we don't want a lot, right? We just want a nice little, we want to just pick on those points that are, so I'm just using my brush kind of flat. I'm not going down in, I'm not digging down in there. I'm just hitting those raised edges, okay? So that's what you want to do when you're shading. A little goes a long way. I'm going to pull it up and see what I have left. It's feeling pretty dry, so let's go ahead. I'm actually going to add a tiny bit more water to my stuff that's been sitting here a while. And I'm going to pull it all out of my brush again. You just have to do that every so often and pull it back out. And I'm going to really pull it out of my brush this time because I'm going on the top. And it's easier to add and build than it is to subtract paint, especially when you're shading. So I'm not getting a lot of color, right? You can see I'm not getting a lot of color, but again, I'm going to tap, tap, tap. And there we go. We're hitting those high parts again. And I think we're pretty close now to the other one. So here's our one that we just did a minute ago. And it's already pretty dry. I mean, I'm not feeling any tackiness already. So they dry pretty quick because you're just dry brushing it on. Okay. This one probably has a little less in spots, but that's okay. They don't have to be exactly the same. You don't need them to be identical because you're going to be displaying them together. And like I said, they don't bake the same in the oven. So again, here you have, now that we have one that's kind of dry, there's our three. This is what we started with, and it looks like I got some paint on that one, so ignore that. This is our shade number 1, this is our shade number 2, and I think that makes us look like we have a fully real baked lovely biscuit. Okay, so imagine those displayed in a little basket with a check napkin or something like that. Be super cute on your kitchen table or in a farmhouse display, everyday display. Okay, So there we have it. If you like this video, please hit that like button and please subscribe. I'll be adding more videos as I can. Thank you so much. This is Imposter Baker. Have a great day.